The moment Miles' lips pressed against mine in the quiet hallway, just off the Grand Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom, my entire world tilted on its axis. I pushed him away, heart pounding like a drum in my chest, but the taste of his kiss lingered, warm and terrifying, as the sounds of my engagement party filtered through the door behind us. "Miles, what the hell?" I whispered, my voice shaking as I stared at my best friend of 15 years. His eyes, those familiar brown eyes that had shared late-night study sessions in college and road trips across the country, were now filled with something raw and desperate I had never allowed myself to name. He stepped back, running a hand through his dark hair, the same way he did whenever he was nervous about a big photography shoot. "Leo, I'm sorry. I just couldn't stand there watching you toast to a life that isn't you. Not anymore." The hallway smelled of fresh lilies from the centerpieces Emily had chosen, and the distant clink of champagne glasses reminded me that 200 people, including my parents and my boss, were waiting for me to return as the perfect fiancé. But in that split second, none of it mattered. My hands trembled as I wiped my mouth, not because the kiss disgusted me, but because it didn't. It felt like the first honest thing that had happened to me in years. I had met Miles Rivera during freshman orientation at NYU. He was the quiet kid from Queens with a camera slung over his shoulder, always capturing moments others missed. I was the guy from a small town in Connecticut, chasing the big city dream with a marketing degree and a smile that hid everything. We bonded over cheap pizza and all-night talks about our futures. He came out to me sophomore year, and I had clapped him on the back, told him I was proud, all while burying the flutter in my own chest whenever he laughed at my bad jokes. I convinced myself it was just admiration. Straight guys could feel close to their gay friends, right? Emily came along 3 years ago, the daughter of my agency's CEO. She was smart, ambitious, and safe. Proposing to her 6 months ago felt like the logical next step on the ladder I had been climbing since graduation. My parents beamed when I told them. Finally settling down, Dad had said, slapping my shoulder like I had won the lottery. Now Miles stood there, breathing hard, waiting for me to say something. "This is my engagement party, man," I managed, the words tasting like ash. "Emily is out there telling everyone how perfect we are." He flinched, but his gaze never wavered. "And how does that feel, Leo? Really feel?" The question hung between us like smoke. I wanted to laugh it off, to punch his arm and call him an idiot the way I always did. Instead, I felt a crack forming in the wall I had built so carefully. Guest laughter spilled louder as someone opened the ballroom door. I grabbed Miles' sleeve and pulled him further down the hall, away from prying eyes. "You can't just drop this on me tonight. Not here." My voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw the pain I had caused him over the years reflected back at me. We had shared an apartment for 2 years after college while I interned, and he built his freelance portfolio. Late nights editing campaigns on my laptop, while he developed photos in the darkroom he rigged in the bathroom. I remembered the way his shoulder brushed mine when we both reached for the coffee pot, the comfortable silence that never felt awkward. I had dated women, convinced myself the spark was there. But standing in that hallway with my best friend's confession echoing in my ears, I realized the spark had always been with him. "I need air," I muttered, pushing past him toward the emergency exit. The cool night air hit me like a slap as I stepped onto the rooftop terrace, city lights sprawling below like scattered diamonds. Miles followed, the door clicking shut behind us. "Leo, say something. Anything." His voice was softer now, almost pleading. I leaned against the railing, gripping the cold metal until my knuckles whitened. Inside, Emily was probably wondering where I had disappeared to. My mother would be checking her watch, ready to give her speech about how proud she was of her son, the rising star. And here I was, 32 years old, realizing that every choice I had made to fit in had been a lie. "I don't know what to say," I admitted finally, turning to face him. The wind ruffled his hair, and in the glow of the skyline, he looked both vulnerable and impossibly strong. "This changes everything." He nodded slowly, hands in his pockets. "Yeah, it does." We stood there in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the party music pulsing faintly below us. When I finally walked back inside alone, I plastered on the smile that had gotten me through every board meeting and family dinner. But something had shifted. The ring on my finger felt heavier, the congratulations ringing hollow. I found Emily near the dessert table, her blonde hair shining under the chandeliers. She kissed my cheek, oblivious, and whispered, "Everything okay?" I nodded, but inside the storm was just beginning. The rest of the night blurred into forced laughter and toasts I barely heard. Miles stayed on the periphery, chatting with old college friends, but our eyes met across the room more than once. Each glance sent a jolt through me that I could no longer ignore. When the party finally wound down and guests trickled out, I helped Emily into a cab, promising to call her in the morning. Then I walked the 20 blocks home alone, the city noise doing nothing to drown out the echo of that kiss. By the time I reached my apartment in Brooklyn, the weight of what had happened settled like concrete in my chest. I poured a glass of whiskey and stared at the photos on the wall, snapshots Miles had taken over the years. Us at the beach in Montauk, grinning like idiots. Him capturing my profile while I worked late. In every frame, the truth stared back at me. I had been in love with my best friend all along, and now I couldn't pretend otherwise. Sleep evaded me until dawn, and when it came, it brought dreams of hallways and kisses and the terrifying freedom of finally being seen. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the blinds of my apartment like accusations. I sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, replaying the kiss in my mind until it looped endlessly. Miles had texted once at midnight. "I'm here if you want to talk." No pressure. I hadn't replied. How could I? Emily had already called twice, her voice bright with plans for our future wedding venue. I let go to voicemail both times. The engagement ring box sat open on the counter, the diamond catching the light mockingly. 15 years of friendship with Miles, and one moment had unraveled it all. Or maybe it had just exposed what was always there. I showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a hoodie instead of my usual suit, and headed to the small cafe where Miles and I always met for Sunday brunch. He was already there, nursing a latte, his camera bag at his feet like a faithful dog. When I slid into the booth across from him, he looked up with cautious hope. "You came." His voice was steady, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. "Yeah, I did." We ordered the usual, eggs Benedict for me, avocado toast for him, but neither of us touched the food when it arrived. Last night, I started, then stopped, rubbing my temples. "It wasn't just the champagne talking for you, was it?" He shook his head. "No, it's been years, Leo. Since that summer we drove to Cape Cod, and you fell asleep on my shoulder. I knew then, but you were dating that girl from your internship, and I didn't want to lose you." The confession hit like a wave. I remembered that trip vividly, the bonfire on the beach, the way his laugh mixed with the ocean roar. I had felt something too, but shoved it down, blaming the beer and the stars. Why now? At my engagement party, of all places? Miles leaned forward, eyes intense. "Because watching you propose to Emily was like watching you bury yourself alive. I couldn't pretend anymore. And I think part of you couldn't either, or you wouldn't have kissed me back." I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words died. He was right. In that hallway, for those few seconds, I had kissed him back. The realization sent heat rushing to my face. "I called Emily this morning," I said quietly. "Told her we need to talk. I can't marry her, Miles. Not when." I trailed off, unable to finish. He reached across the table, but stopped short of touching my hand. "You don't have to decide everything today. This is huge." But it felt like the decision had already been made the second his lips met mine. We talked for hours, dissecting our friendship, the moments we had both ignored. He told me about the nights he lay awake listening to me date other people, how he dated casually, but never seriously because his heart was stuck on me. I admitted the jealousy I felt whenever he brought someone home, how I chalked it up to protectiveness. By the time we left the cafe, the sun was high over Brooklyn, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of expectation crushing my ribs. That afternoon, I met Emily at her apartment in Manhattan. She opened the door with a smile that faded the moment she saw my face. "What's wrong?" I sat her down on the couch, the same one where we had planned our honeymoon, and told her everything. Not the details of the kiss, but the truth. "I'm not straight, Em. I think I've known for a long time, but I was too scared to admit it. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't yell. Miles, she guessed softly. I nodded. The silence stretched until she stood and walked to the window. I deserve better than being someone's cover story. Her words stung because they were true. I left the ring on the coffee table and walked out feeling lighter and heavier all at once. Back home, my phone buzzed with a call from my mother. Darling, Emily just texted me. What on earth is going on? Her voice was sharp with worry. I sank onto the couch, Miles' text lighting up my screen again. How'd it go? I ignored both for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The apartment felt different now, like it belonged to someone braver. When I finally answered my mother, I kept it vague. Mom, the wedding is off. I need some time to figure things out. She pressed for details, but I hung up before the questions became accusations. Miles showed up at my door an hour later with takeout Thai and 2 beers. We ate in silence at first, then talked until midnight. Whatever happens, he said as he left, I'm not going anywhere. That night, alone in bed, I allowed myself to imagine what life could look like without the mask. It terrified me, but it also felt like coming home. The following week blurred into meetings at work where I smiled through presentations, all while my mind replayed every conversation with Miles. Colleagues noticed I seemed distracted, but no one guessed the revolution happening inside me. On Thursday, my father called from Connecticut. Your mother is worried sick. Is this some kind of midlife crisis? His tone carried the same disapproval I had heard growing up whenever I chose our class over football. I wanted to tell him the truth right then, but the words stuck. Instead, I promised to visit soon. Hanging up, I texted Miles, dinner tonight? Need to process. He replied instantly, my place. 7. Walking to his apartment in Queens, the autumn leaves crunching under my boots, I felt the first stirrings of hope mixed with dread. This was the beginning of something real, but I knew the road ahead would test every bond one had. Thanksgiving arrived like a storm cloud over the city. I had agreed to drive to my parents' house in Connecticut with Miles in the passenger seat, both of us pretending it was just a normal holiday visit. The car ride was tense, filled with small talk about his latest photo exhibit and my stall promotion at the agency. But underneath, the unspoken hung heavy. My family still thought the engagement breakup was a cold feet thing. Emily had been gracious enough not to spill details, but rumors were starting to swirl. As we pulled into the driveway of the white Colonial my parents had bought after Dad's retirement, Miles squeezed my knee briefly. You've got this. His touch sent a spark through me that I no longer tried to deny. Inside, the house smelled of turkey and pie, my mother bustling in her apron while Dad watched football. My sister Claire and her husband were already there, kids running around the living room. Hugs and hellos masked the tension until we sat down for dinner. Mom passed the mashed potatoes and asked innocently, So, Leo, any new prospects since Emily? The table went quiet. I set down my fork, heart hammering. Miles sat beside me, his presence steady. Actually, I said, voice steadier than I felt. There's someone. It's new, but it's real. Dad grunted, eyes on his plate. Better not be another city girl who can't commit. The words were a challenge. I glanced at Miles, whose jaw was tight. It's not a girl, Dad. It's Miles. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire's fork clattered. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad slowly set down his knife. What kind of joke is this? His voice was low, dangerous. I reached for Miles' hand under the table, finding it cold but firm. It's not a joke. I've been figuring this out for a long time. Miles has been my best friend forever, and now he's more. The explanation poured out in halting sentences, the years of hiding, the kiss that broke the dam. Mom started crying softly. We raised you right. This isn't who you are. Dad stood abruptly, chair scraping. Get out of my house. Both of you. The kids stared wide-eyed as Claire tried to calm everyone. Miles and I rose, plates untouched. The drive back to New York was silent, except for the radio playing old rock songs we used to sing together in college. Back in the city, the fallout spread like wildfire. My sister texted me the next day. Dad's furious. Mom won't stop crying. Give him time. Work was no better. Whispers followed me in the office after someone overheard a phone call. My boss, Emily's father called me in. Personal life is personal, but clients talk. Keep it professional. The warning was clear. I nodded, but inside, resentment built. That weekend, Miles suggested a walk in Central Park to clear our heads. Leaves crunched underfoot as we strolled past the lake. I never wanted to cause this, he said quietly. I stopped, turning to face him. You didn't. I did by hiding for so long. This is my fight now. We sat on a bench, shoulders touching, and for the first time since the party, I leaned in and kissed involuntarily. It was soft, tentative, but full of promise. Passers-by didn't stare. The city moved on around us. Yet the pressure mounted. My mother left voicemails pleading for me to come home and talk like a man. A colleague I thought was a friend distanced himself, canceling our weekly lunches. Miles faced his own battles. His conservative aunt back in Queens stopped inviting him to family gatherings. One night, after a particularly rough day, I broke down in his arms on the couch. What if they never accept this? He held me tight, voice steady. Then we build our own family. You and me. His words anchored me. We started small rituals, cooking dinner together, editing his photos while I brainstormed campaigns. Slowly, the internal storm eased. I began seeing a therapist recommended by a gay coworker, unpacking years of denial. It's okay to grieve the life you thought you'd have, she said during one session. The grief was real, but so was the relief. By Christmas, I had made a decision. I turned down the promotion that required more travel and schmoozing with conservative clients. Instead, I applied for a position at a smaller firm known for its inclusive culture. Miles celebrated with me by taking me to his favorite rooftop bar, city lights twinkling below. We toasted to new beginnings, hands intertwined openly. The road was far from smooth, but each step forward felt like shedding an old skin. My sister's kids sent handmade cards saying they missed Uncle Leo, a small crack in the family wall. Miles and I spent New Year's Eve watching the ball drop from my balcony, wrapped in blankets. As fireworks exploded overhead, he whispered, "No more pretending." I kissed him, knowing he was right. The new year stretched ahead, full of uncertainty but also possibility. Winter turned to spring, and with it came the first real test of our budding relationship. Miles had landed a big gallery show in Soho, his photographs of city life finally getting the recognition he deserved. I was there opening night, proud and nervous in my new button-down, mingling with art collectors while he charmed the crowd. But halfway through the evening, Emily appeared, uninvited but polite. She pulled me aside near a large print of the Brooklyn Bridge at dawn. "I heard about you and Miles. I'm happy for you, Leo, really. But your dad called me last week. He's worried you're throwing your life away." Her words landed like stones. I had thought the family silence meant they were processing, but Dad was still fighting through proxies. The next morning, I confronted it head-on with a phone call. "Dad, this isn't a phase. Miles makes me happier than I've ever been." His response was curt. "Happiness isn't everything. What about grandkids? Your mother's health?" The guilt trip was familiar, but now it clashed with the life I was building. Miles listened as I vented later that evening over pasta at his place. "Maybe I need to go see them alone," I suggested. He nodded, supportive as always. The drive to Connecticut felt longer this time. Mom met me at the door with a hug that lingered too long. Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. We sat in the living room, the same one where I had opened Christmas presents as a kid. "Son, we love you," Mom started, voice trembling. "But this lifestyle, it's not what we envisioned." I laid it out calmly, sharing stories of my therapy sessions, the joy in simple moments with Miles. Dad finally spoke. "You've always been stubborn. Just don't expect us at any weddings." The visit ended in uneasy truce. Back in New York, worked through another curveball. A major client pulled out after hearing rumors about my personal life, citing brand alignment. My new boss was understanding, but the financial hit stung. Miles suggested we take a weekend trip upstate to escape. We rented a cabin in the Catskills, hiking trails during the day and talking by the fireplace at night. "You've sacrificed so much already," he said one evening, firelight dancing on his face. "Your job stability, your family. I don't want to be the reason you lose more." I pulled him close. "You're not the reason. You're the reward. That weekend solidified something deep between us. We returned recharged, ready to face whatever came next. But misunderstandings brewed. A mutual friend from college posted a photo of us at the gallery opening, captioned, "Finally." It went viral in our circles, and suddenly my sister Claire called in tears. Dad saw it. He's talking about changing his will. The betrayal felt sharp, even though I knew it wasn't intentional. Miles blamed himself for encouraging the public post. We argued for the first time, voices raised in my living room. "I never asked you to hide us," I snapped, frustration boiling over. He retreated to the couch, head in hands. Maybe we moved too fast. The silence that followed was worse than the fight. I spent the night on the balcony, staring at the skyline, questioning if love was worth fracturing my entire world. The next day, I found Miles at a studio, surrounded by prints. "I'm sorry," I said simply. He looked up, eyes red. "Me too. This isn't easy for either of us." We spent hours talking it through, mapping out boundaries with family and work. Slowly, the rift mended. Spring flowers bloomed in Central Park as we walked hand in hand, no longer caring who saw. My therapist praised the progress. "You're learning to choose yourself without losing everyone else." By late May, the smaller firm offered me a raise for a campaign that celebrated diversity. Miles' photos sold out at the gallery. Life was balancing, fragile but real. Yet the undercurrent of family rejection lingered, a shadow we both felt. One quiet evening, Miles turned to me in bed. "Whatever happens, we're in this together." I believed him. The growth was painful, but it was ours. Summer brought heat waves and unexpected alliances. My sister Claire showed up unannounced at my apartment one humid afternoon, her kids in tow. Dad's being stubborn, but Mom and I talked. "We want to meet Miles properly." The gesture was small, but monumental. We arranged a neutral lunch at a diner in the city. Mom arrived first, fidgeting with her napkin. When Miles walked in, she stood and hugged him awkwardly. "You've always been like a son," she said softly. Dad stayed home, but it was progress. Claire's kids called Miles uncle by the end of the meal, easing the tension with innocent questions about his camera. Work stabilized too. The diversity campaign I led went viral internally, earning me recognition that offset the earlier loss. Colleagues who had pulled away started reaching out again. One even apologized over coffee. I didn't know how to handle it. "Sorry." Miles celebrated with me by cooking his grandmother's recipe for arroz con pollo, the apartment filling with savory smells and laughter. But old wounds reopened when a cousin from Dad's side posted online about family values, tagging me indirectly. The comments flooded in, some supportive, many not. Miles found me scrolling late one night, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. "They don't define us," he reminded me gently. We decided to limit social media, focusing instead on building our circle. A turning point came during a weekend visit to my parents. Dad was civil but distant until Miles offered to help fix the old shed in the backyard, something Dad had complained about for months. They worked side by side in the sun, grunting over nails and wood. By evening, Dad clapped Miles on the back. "You're handy, I'll give you that." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a bridge. Driving home, Miles and I held hands across the console. "See? Small steps," he said. I squeezed back, grateful. Yet sacrifice loomed. The smaller firm wanted me to relocate to their Boston office for expansion. It meant leaving New York, our friends, the life we had carved. Miles' gallery opportunities were here. We debated for weeks, weighing options. "I want to ask you to choose me over your career," he said one night. But I knew what my heart wanted. I declined the move, opting instead for a hybrid role that kept us rooted. The decision cost me a bonus, but the peace it brought was worth it. Miles surprised me with a weekend getaway to the Hamptons, where we walked the beach at sunset. "Thank you for choosing us," he whispered as waves lapped our feet. Family reconciliation deepened slowly. Mom started texting Miles recipes. Dad sent a gruff email about a baseball game. Misunderstandings still surfaced, like when a relative assumed we were just roommates. Each time, we corrected gently, standing firm. Through it all, our bond strengthened. Late summer nights on the rooftop, sharing wine and dreams, solidified that we had grown into something unbreakable. The internal crisis that began with one kiss had transformed into quiet strength. I no longer questioned who I was. I was Leo, in love with Miles, building a life on truth. Fall leaves painted the city in gold as Miles, and I moved into a new apartment together in Williamsburg. Bigger windows, a darkroom corner for him, and space for my work desk. The move symbolized everything we had fought for, a shared future without shadows. My family sent a housewarming plant with a note from Mom. Proud of you both. Dad's handwriting was on it too, a single word, congratulations. Small victories accumulated. At work, I mentored a young intern struggling with his own identity, paying forward the support I had found. Miles' new exhibit focused on queer joy in urban spaces, drawing crowds and acclaim. One crisp evening, we hosted our first dinner party. Claire and her family came, along with a few close friends. Laughter filled the rooms as stories flowed. Later, alone on the balcony overlooking the East River, Miles pulled me close. Remember the hallway at the Grand Plaza? I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder. How could I forget? It was the scariest and best moment of my life. We had come full circle from shock to serenity. The journey had included tears, arguments, sacrifices, and profound awakening. I had lost some illusions, but gained authenticity. Miles had waited patiently, never pushing, allowing me to grow at my own pace. As winter approached again, we planned a quiet holiday in Vermont, just the two of us. Driving up the snowy roads, I reflected on how far we had traveled. The man who once hid behind a straight facade now held his partner's hand openly. Family dinners were still imperfect. Work had its challenges, but the internal peace outweighed it all. Miles glanced over from the driver's seat. What are you thinking? That true love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every day, even when the world pushes back. He smiled, the same warm smile that had started it all. Our story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours, rooted in honesty and resilience. As the snow fell softly outside our cabin window that first night, I knew we had not only survived but thrived. The emotional growth, the confrontations, the quiet moments of understanding, they all led here. Looking at Miles across the fire, I felt complete. True or false? Hiding your true self can ever truly protect the people you love?